With this opening, you will not stop winning. It starts off with the king's pawn, black copies it, you develop the knight, black protects the pawn, you get the bishop out, he gets the bishop out. A very common position. And now this is where it begins. You castle it out, and after black develops the knight, trying to prepare the castle, you surprise him. Sacrifice the pawn. He can take this pawn by the pawn, bishop, or the knight. Pawn takes, you simply push the pawn, kicking away the knight on f6. If the knight comes out trying to be crazy, you just attack him out. And the knight cannot go anywhere backwards, all the squares are covered. If he tries f5 to save the knight, you can just take the pawn and the position is gone for black. You attack the knight, you're threatening to push the pawn, take this pawn, he cannot castle. Black tries d5, protecting the knight and attacking the bishop. Then you should know this move. Put your knight to g5. This way, you attack this knight. He cannot take, you win the knight. Also, you're threatening to take the pawn or maybe push it or give a check from this side. White is completely crushing this. Instead of f5, if he tries d5 to save the knight, same problem. You take away the pawn. f5, save the knight. You can simply pressure out the knight. You're attacking this, covering this diagonal. He cannot castle. The pawn is looking there. And again, white is just better. What if he tries d5, saying, you attack my knight, I attack your bishop. You take the knight, he takes the bishop. You give a check. Obviously, he would not move the king. That seems a bit too stupid. He blocks it, take the pawn. The pawn is already on g7. He moves the rook, develop the bishop, attack the queen out. A normal move like bishop here is already bad. You can just get rid of the bishop and take the pawn. You got back your pawn. The king is stuck in the center. There's pin on this side. You can develop and slowly play this out. If black tries to be greedy and puts the queen on d5, saying queen is active, I attack the bishop, I save everything and maybe I'll castle it out, you strike him with knight c3, attacking the queen and developing your last piece. Cannot take, you simply win the queen. The only option is to move away the queen, and now you strike him with another good move, knight to e4, attacking the bishop, threatening knight f6 to fork out the king and the rook. And if he takes the pawn, thinking he's 2 pawns up, suddenly after knight h4, the queen is trapped. Go to g4, fork him out. Go to d5, fork him out. Last option, go to e5, discovered attack. The knight attacks the king and the rook attacks the queen. If he does not take the pawn, but maybe tries bishop here, let's trade some pieces. You can get rid of the bishop and simply take the center pawn. The queen prevents the king from castling. The knight is looking to go to f6, fork the king and the rook. Once again, you're winning this. We looked at knight here and pawn here. What about knight here? This is where the fun lies. You get to sacrifice the bishop on move 7, blow open the king. Obviously he'll take it, then you launch a check. Queen attacks the knight and the knight attacks the king. He cannot take it, the bishop protects it. King moves away, you get back the piece and the black king can never castle. If he takes the pawn, you just put the queen in the center. Attack out the knight and also you're threatening to go here. Attack the bishop, attack the knight, attack the king. Only move to save everything. You still give the check. King has to go to f8 and now you want to deliver a mate on f7 but the knight covers it. Get rid of that knight. Pawn push. And a normal move like pawn here, trying to kick away the queen, is game over. You don't save the queen but take the knight. Disco attack. And this is game over. Instead of pawn takes, let's say he takes the pawn with the knight. Now, simple. Take back the pawn. You're no longer pawn down. You're threatening to take on f7, fork the queen and the rook. He castles. Simply develop the bishop. Attack the knight and pin the knight to the bishop. If he tries d6 to kick away the knight, time for Desperado. Sacrifice the knight on f7. Attack the queen. Rook takes. You take out the rook and you win the exchange. So the only thing he can try is to bring the knight back to e6, simply defending the bishop. Now, do not take the bishop, but take the knight. If he takes back the bishop, you win the bishop bishop on c5, and d6 fork does not work, as you can simply come back. He cannot take the knight, you get the rook, and again your exchange up. What if he takes the bishop? Then you do not take back the bishop, but take on f7, Desperado bishop. If he takes, you take back, attack the queen, and win the piece. Again, your exchange up. Let's say by some miracle he does not take the bishop but highs on h8. You do not take the bishop but go back with the bishop. This way is threatening to take here, threatening to go there, fork the queen and the king, and too many problems for black. Last choice, if he takes the pawn with the bishop, you remove the bishop. If he takes back with the pawn, again same problem comes. You push the pawn to e5. If he has to go back, he's sad. And if he takes it, you simply pin it. And protection does not help. You get f4, you pin the knight, and you win it. So he takes back with the knight. And now continue developing. Develop the bishop. Pin this knight to the queen. If he castles, you'll get f4, open up the f file and pressure out this knight. And if he tries h6 to kick away the knight, simply come back. And if he tries g5 saying bye bye bishop, you do not go back but go for the crazy f4, sacrifice everything. He cannot take the bishop as you simply take the center pawn. This way the queen attacks the knight, the pawn attacks this knight, the rook is looking on f7 and the bishop is looking on f7. Black is lost. Instead of the bishop, if he takes the pawn, now you can simply take the knight. You're no longer piece down, you're starting to push the pawn. If he takes the bishop, you simply take on f4, pressure on this side, pin the knight to the rook, and the king is still stuck in the center. One last try. If he takes the pawn with the g, then what do? You sacrifice the rook, pressuring out the knight on f6. He takes back, you simply chop off the knight. Look at this. The bishop spins the knight to the queen. The queen pins the knight to the rook. You're gonna win some juicy material and win the game. Instead of h6, if black tries d6, simply get the bishop out, trade, maybe long castle. No time for you to waste. Go f4. Open up that f file. Bishop here, do not trade. This is the cheeky move. Put the knight on a3, simply defending the bishop. If he takes, you can take back with the knight. You're threatening to take here, pressure on the knight, open up the f file. Again, you're cruising. Let's say black plays queen here, trying to get the king out ASAP. Now you take the pawn and do not take the knight. I know you want to double up the pawns. Simply play c3, kicking away the knight. And now a strong move. Put your queen on f3. Let the black king castle. You're not afraid. And if black tries to be cheeky, saying queen check, and this way I win the bishop? No, you have b4, simply kicking away the queen. Queen goes back and you chop it off. Now this knight is looking to go to here, and you still have the pin. Castle, simply hop in with the knight. No rush in taking. The knight will go there and take it out. If he tries to pin you, that doesn't work. The knight hops. He cannot take the queen as you take back the queen with a check, and this way again exchange up. If he tries to move away the queen, get away with the pin. Put your knight on f5, simply threatening to take on g7. Can the rook protect the pawn? No, you sacrifice the knight, take the knight, and again free exchange for you. If he tries g6 to kick away the knight, another good trick. Put the knight on g7, simply attack the queen, and now you win the knight. It might look like the knight is trapped, but no worries. Simply give a check, put the knight to e6. The knight dies, but the rook cries. This way you get away your knight. What if he does not give a check, but simply takes the bishop? This way he check and he attacks the knight. No worry, the knight can come back. You save the knight and he's in trouble again. You still attack this knight. You can move the king away, hop the knight to d5 or f5. Again, you're chilling.